Hello, Dr. Shu and Ashley. Welcome to the Empowered Nutrition Podcast. How are you guys today?
Doing well. Thank you for having us.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
thanks.
Aaron.
Yeah,
Such a pleasure. Yep.
thanks for coming on the show. And I know everybody's already heard a little intro to both of you, but maybe just to kick it off, maybe you can both tell us a little bit about your story of how did you become involved with L-Nutra, which is maybe known by most people as Prolon. A little bit. How did you end up in this space?
Yeah. Maybe I'll go first. And I'm an endocrinologist by training and been in medicine for about 25 years. And for much of this time, medication had always been my biggest kind of toolbox. And so are my colleagues, right? So whenever the patient comes and they need some help, we would talk a little bit about nutrition, and then we would quickly reach out to our prescription pads or now electronic pads, right? And type in the prescriptions. And I think, I've been thinking a lot about this whole area and asking the question, given that metabolic conditions are mostly age related and mostly lifestyle related, is medication really the best way? And I'd done a lot of thinking around that, and which really prompted my exit out of the academic world and clinical world, and really came to L-Nutra, the company that's a Nutritech solution company that really try to drive the agenda of food as medicine. And I hope to have a chance to share with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And how about you, Ashley?
Yes, so I'm a dietitian and a diabetes educator, but I've been practicing for over 15 years and had worked in the hospital setting for a long time and had kind of moved into critical care in 2020. This was a benefit for me of the pandemic. I moved out of the hospital setting and into telehealth, and it was a great experience for me to get back to what I truly loved, which is seeing people see results and make changes. Erin, I don't know if you ever worked in the hospital, but
Yeah.
it's just
It's
constant
yeah.
turnover and you never know what they take and accept and
Yeah.
implement into their life. So it's
Yeah.
given me the opportunity to see changes. And then here within L-Nutra Health, the opportunity to not only drive nutrition and how to optimize your health with lifestyle medicine, because we really do focus on all the different pillars of lifestyle medicine, but to implement fasting mimicking diet too, and to see the changes that our members have come in and experienced with incorporating prolonged fasting into their life has been
Yeah.
really rewarding.
Yeah. I want to get into what exactly a fasting mimicking diet is and in a minute, but maybe almost to what you've already touched on and a little more broadly. I saw like a discussion or almost an argument in a dietitian group this week, and it was around the topic of can type 2 diabetes actually be reversed, because a dietitian had said that they had helped a patient achieve that, and then the other dietitian said, basically, you're a quack. Type 2 diabetes can't be reversed. Once you have it for life. It can improve, but there's no such thing as diabetes reversal. I'm curious what you both think about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. That debate, it's not the first time.
Yeah.
And in fact, in 2021, several organizations got together. So the American Diabetes Association, the Endocrine Society, the Diabetes UK, and the EASD, they got together and wrote actually a review on this, a consensus statement around this. And they say, hey, you know what? When you look at what happens to people who've gone through bariatric surgery, who had intense lifestyle changes, and look at people who have lost a lot of weight, you do see glycemic control improving. You do see people getting off medicine. But the debate wasn't on can you reverse it. They used the term called remission, not
Yeah.
a cure. They used the term remission, and they wrote a statement around this and say, hey, you know what? This is ought to be the new end goal for all clinicians, not only to achieve glycemic control, but they're really putting the kind of the spotlight on this whole concept of diabetes remission. So
Hmm.
so I think it's out there, right? And
Yeah.
and I think these thinkers these are experts who are really beginning to say, wait a minute, it's possible. It is not a cure. And they borrow the term actually from the cancer world. You don't ever say, oh, cancer is cured, but you say, hell, that person is in remission.
Mhm.
I think that's a great concept for us to really think about.
Yeah, I think remission is smart because it's saying it may be able to apply is you still have an increased risk because of your history with this. And so we don't want to think of you exactly the same as someone who's never had type 2 diabetes, but it's not the same as the sort of classic care where you're medicated to achieve
Hmm.
normal blood sugar or blood sugar
Hmm.
goals. That's not really remission. That's active type 2 diabetes on medication. So they're talking about this kind of zone where it's you potentially don't need
Yeah.
medication anymore to
And
achieve normal levels.
then they defined it as A1C, hemoglobin A1C, as your listener may know. That's a lab test that measures the glucose over the last 3 months. And to get it less than 6.5% for at least 3 months
Hmm.
without medications, then you can
Mhm.
call that person to being diabetes remission. Great
Yeah.
concept.
Okay. Well, then let's tie in fasting. Tell me if someone does have even pre-diabetes or even type 2 diabetes, what do you all suggest? Is it do you suggest that they incorporate some type of time restricted feeding or longer periods of fasting? What do you think the evidence says on the best approach to that?
Here,
Ashley, you wanted to, yeah, go ahead.
sure. I'll tackle this one first. We encourage several cycles of the fasting mimicking diet. At least like for somebody with prediabetes or maybe just looking to lose weight, improve metabolic health, maybe high blood pressure, do at least 4 cycles of the fasting mimicking diet. And that repetition, along with healthy eating in between, has really shown great results with improving their A1C because fasting, just to kind of step back a little bit, the prolonged fasting benefits are great. It's not just like the intermittent fasting, which there are benefits there. And we encourage some time restricted eating too. But the prolonged fasting benefits reduce inflammation. There's improvement in insulin sensitivity, overall cellular repair. So having some repetitive cycles of fasting can truly improve systemically their health. All the cells in the body can see cellular health and reduction in biological age, and so they can drive that A1C down. So whether they are pre-diabetic or maybe they have type 2 diabetes and they've had it for 10 plus years, then they will also see benefits from prolonged fasting for the same things. The improvement and a lot of different biomarkers, in fact. So we
Okay.
definitely recommend it.
Yeah. So maybe we should clarify a few things. So when we say time restricted feeding, and tell me if you think differently, but we're talking about something that's been researched where instead of eating across an unlimited window in a given 24-hour cycle, it's restricted to a
Mhm.
certain time window within that 24 hours. So like an 8-hour window, a 12-hour window would be a common thing, or even a 6-hour window. And then when you say prolonged fasting, you're talking about fasting for more than a day, probably like
Greater
several
than
days.
48 hours. Yes. So in fact,
Okay, 48 hours.
with a prolonged fast, well, let's talk through the 5 days if you do a prolonged fast. The fasting mimicking diet, for anybody that's listening that's not familiar, it's a 5-day fast. And so day one, you're transitioning into the fasting state. And you start moving from burning glucose as your main source of fuel into burning fat and ketones on day two. And then day 3, 4, and 5 is really when the beauty happens of autophagy. That's when we see those cellular benefits. So it's really the differentiation is greater than 48 hours of fasting, which traditionally had been with water fasting only. But now we have this novel nutrition technology that allows you to have that prolonged fast that you can do safely and increase adherence because you don't have a lot of the challenges like hunger that you would have doing a 5-day water fast. So it
Okay.
allows your body to get into true cellular cleanup.
Okay, so you're talking about now doing a prolonged fast for more than the 48 hours and actually 5 days. But then what you're talking about with the fasting mimicking diet is that what you make is a kit, basically, where the food, you can actually eat this specially designed food during those 5 days and still have your body be basically in a fasted state, but without having to actually fully not eat. You're eating a little bit of this special food.
Exactly. You get nourishment throughout the fast. So it
Okay.
makes it safe, it makes it easy. A lot of people even say it feels like a lot of food to them, but it gives you this right macronutrient distribution to help you get the benefits of the fast. But what you're really doing, because it's not about the macronutrients specifically, it's about evading these nutrient sensing pathways, which I'm going to kick over to Dr. Shu to explain a little bit more about those, because that's really where autophagy begins.
Yeah. This is a good conversation because, one of the big questions people have is, are all the fasts the same? Don't they do the same thing? And I would say that it's actually different. Just when we think about exercise, there are many different exercises, right? There's strength training, but there's also endurance training, and certainly, and they will have a different impact on the body system. The intermittent fastings are great for metabolic improvements, and there are numerous studies to show, for example, it reduces insulin resistance, it'll help with weight control, right, and then improves glycemic control, and so I think that people accept. But what we're really talking about here is through the prolonged fasting, it gets to a deeper level. It's not only fasting physiologically, but we're talking fasting cellularly. Now, let me explain, because that's a concept that's not common to most people. Is when you picture food coming into the body, the most fundamental unit of the body is actually the cells. And for the cells to experience fasting, you actually don't have to starve them with no food. What you need to do is simply to give them enough nutrients, but the nutrients must fall below their ability to detect it. And so every cell, it's got these eyes and ears on the surface of the cells. We call that the nutrient sensors, right? And they're like the thermostat on the wall of your home. When the temperature drops to a certain level, then the heater turns on, right? And so same thing, all these cells have these nutrient sensors. And when there's when the amount of nutrients exceeds a certain level, it's going to tell the cells to grow. But when the nutrients fall a certain level, the suppression of those signals is going to tell the cells, hey, it's time to rejuvenate. And so the fasting mimicking diet was developed scientifically, 25 years of research, and it was research at the University of Southern California, through series of laboratory study to say, hey, how much nutrients can we actually give, but you can still fly under the radar of these nutrient sensors. That's why it's called a nutrient technology. And that's why it's actually not a fast, it's actually nourishment, right? It's actually food, it's actually nutrients. And so as Ashley was talking about, as you go through the 5 days, you're getting the benefits of a 5-day fast without actually starving, right? I mean, the food is not going to be, it's not going to make you go to bed with a full stomach, obviously, because it's still fasting mimicking, but it's sufficient enough to support. So right now, over 1 million people have enjoyed the benefits of Prolon worldwide, and that's really the difference between a nourished fast, such as the fasting mimicking diet, versus a shorter intermittent fast. And it really has to do with the manipulation of nutrients to avoid nutrient sensing and trigger a cellular impact that's not seen in general intermittent fasting.
Yeah. So, and tell me if I misunderstand it, but it's that if you just time restricted feed, meaning a short daily window, you're not getting autophagy in the same way, or if at all, or maybe at all. Whereas if you go over that 48 hours and out to even these 5 days, you're getting this autophagy effect, which is a different thing involving
No.
the health of the cells. That
Yeah.
my understanding is that there's misfolded proteins that then your body kind of out of desperation, has to break down these misfolded proteins and use
Yes.
them, which helps the health of the cell. Is that true?
Yeah, Erin, you're absolutely right. So maybe we go over a little bit about this autophagy. What is it? In 2016, Professor Otsumi in Japan actually won the Nobel Prize for this because it's so meaningful and so important, critical for the survival of all cells, from amoeba to yeast to rodents to humans. And that's why he won the Nobel Prize. And it really has to do when there is no food in the environment, how do the cells survive?
Hmm.
So it does a couple of things. One is it will reach out to other parts of the body, namely fat, to say, call for help. I'm sure on energy, I need it, right? So that's
Hmm.
one thing. It's
Hmm.
like when you run out of cash, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to go to the ATM.
Yeah.
In fact, the first ATM is actually your liver. Your liver
Hmm.
has glycogen, you use it up. And
Hmm.
then you got to go inside the bank to the tellers and say, you know what, I need to withdraw some money. That's like going to the Fed.
Yeah.
But what if you run out of all that reserve in your checking account or savings account? What do? Well, you got to sell your properties. This is where cellular autophagy comes in. The cell says, okay, I'm running out of these fuel. How do I live for the next couple of days? And remember, in the history of nature, this happens all the time, right? Doesn't rain, there's no vegetation, right? The animals are somewhere else. You
Natural
cannot hunt.
fasting
It's
food.
natural fasting.
Hmm.
And so how do we actually survive this? Well, the cell says, I got to look inside my cells. What parts can I use to burn a source of energy, but still keep me going and it won't kill me and allow me to survive until when the food becomes available again, rain comes again, animals show up again, right? And that process has been honed for many, many, many years in nature,
Hmm.
however many years you believe we existed on Earth, right? And so, but the cells are smart because now it's got all this time to experiment with this. It's never going to chew up the nucleus, which is really the brain of the cells. That would be suicide.
Right.
What it does, they begin to look for less valuable parts of the cells. And that's why, Aaron, you mentioned earlier the misfolded protein, but also older mitochondria, right? Some of the more malfunction cellular organelles. And I often use this example, and Ashley knows this. I live
Furniture.
in New England. Yeah. I live in New England. It's cold in the winter. What if your thermostat, your heater breaks down? What are you going to do? Well, you might say, well, I have a fireplace. Let me use the fireplace. I mean, nobody really uses the fireplace to warm up these days, right? It's really full of decor and everything. But now you need to use it. But what are you going to throw into the fireplace? Are you going to throw in your most precious furniture, your heirloom, for the table from your grandmother? Of course not. What are you going to throw in there? You're going to look around and say, "Well, that wobbly chair. Okay, I could do without it.
Yeah.
Oh, that whatever wooden blocks that right. You're going to throw away things that's less valuable to you,
Yeah.
and so to what? To survive. But the next morning, what are you going to do? You're going to have to buy a chair to replace the ones that you're throwing in. So now with this cellular autophagy, you're replacing the parts of the cells that are older and more broken, more worn out, and now you replace with the
Yeah.
new one when the food becomes available. And that is really the cellular recycles. And each time you go through that 5-day FMD, you're replacing old parts with new parts, and that's really the amazing part about fasting mimicking diet.
Yeah. Yeah. To further your analogy, it's kind of weird, but it's like almost as if you really needed a good chair in order to continue living in your house comfortably. I guess that kind of is true. It's like if your house now has no good chairs, your house doesn't work very well for you. It seems to be that
Hmm.
autophagy has all of these health and longevity benefits. So it's like, well,
Yeah.
upgrading the furniture wasn't just nice to look at. It turns out that it was really important for the function of the cell. And I'm curious if you know the specific ways, since we're kind of talking about diabetes and insulin
Hmm.
resistance here, how are those two things connected? Why does getting new
Yeah.
mitochondria help me with that? How does that all work?
Yeah. Because all these, not just diabetes, if you look at all the age-related conditions, heart disease, cancer, some of the autoimmune conditions, maybe neurodegenerative diseases, they don't happen in the 20s and 30s, right? They only get worse as we age. Why? Because now there's all these cellular debris that gets built up inside the cell. In the smallest unit of the body, they don't work as well. It's part of the cellular aging. So how do we fundamentally change that? Well, you could give medications according to each of the pathways, and then you ended up with polypharmacy. That's generally what happens. Or you could say, could I trigger this cellular mechanism
Yeah.
in a way where I'm getting the old parts out of the body and replacing with new parts? And this is the beauty of innovations in lifestyle medicine, such as the fasting mimicking diet, where you're getting these organelles, you're getting these worn out parts replaced, and it's not just a single cell. You're affecting every organ system in the body. Just like when a company is going bankrupt, right?
Hmm.
What happens? Every department gets cut, right?
Hmm.
It's not just the diabetes part,
Hmm.
right? The cells are responsible for diabetes, but in the brain, in the heart, in the muscle, in the organ systems. Now, so it's a recycling of the entire body.
Yeah.
That's why it's like when you exercise, many organ system gets impacted. It's not just the muscle. Your bones gets better, your heart pumps better, your lung capacity increases, your
Hmm.
brain functions better.
Yeah.
And now we just uncover another ancient mechanism inside the body that doesn't require medication, doesn't require everyday commitment to a lifestyle change, and still to give
Mhm.
you that systemic impact.
Yeah. The way you kind of connected it's fascinating to me how autophagy is, correct me if I misremembering the research, but there's
Yeah,
research to show that it improves risk of diabetes type 2, improves risk of heart disease, cancer, and dementia. Is that right?
that's exactly right. And because we know lifestyle changes impact all these things, right? Exercise, nutrition. But the reality is it's difficult for everybody, all of us, to live as a saint every single day. And that's why these innovations, looking into how the cells function and trigger these ancient repair genes through these exposure to controlled fast, such as the fasting mimicking diet, is such a new concept. It's such an innovation in healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was out to dinner with somebody yesterday and they're actually asking me about the frequency that they should do a prolonged kit to avoid dementia. And I said, I'm I'm pretty confident there's no research that is granular enough on that question to answer it with an exact number. But think about the fact that autophagy seems to be a well preserved thing across time and species
Hmm.
and necessary for health generally. And I think it's fascinating that most traditional cultures have a fasting practice that they undergo. And I think there's a lot of like natural wisdom and nutrition of things that were kind of figured out over the eons. And they didn't know the exact physiology that underlied it, but they kind of figured out something that was important. And fasting is one of those things. But think about in our modern world that
Hmm.
I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think someone could live their entire life in the United States and never once experience the autophagy that we're talking about. Because at what point would they ever fast for 48 plus hours? And so if you're comparing yourself to that, well, once a year is really good, and maybe twice a year is even better. But and I think you might even recommend 4 times a year or 3 times a year. But it's just kind of crazy the scale of this of like, wow, it's something that's well
Yeah,
preserved and really needed, but it's almost never happening in the Western
yeah.
world unless you think there's some other way that it's happening.
No, you're absolutely right. Actually, well, I
I
think
was
we,
just gonna chime in that it's
yeah, you go ahead.
definitely underutilized. It's like
Yeah,
one of our body's innate capabilities, so we don't give it a chance to
yeah.
experience. So, Erin, to your question about there's plenty of people who've never experienced autophagy. I totally agree with you. I bet there are millions of people that have never ever experienced autophagy.
Yeah, we don't even know about it or know it's good for us. Like, we lived in Turkey for a time, and we
Oh, you
would be
did?
around all these, like, Turkish people all the time, and every summer, it was just, like, I feel like every Westerner is, like, horrified because, "Oh my gosh, these people are fasting." Like, this is it's just terrifying.
Yeah.
Turns out it's really good for them, but and there's a bunch of research on that, but I think that's the first step. It's like, sure, it's underutilized, but not in the way that, like, exercise is. I think most people understand that exercise is healthy for them, but I think with
Hmm.
this, people it's not even they think it they probably I think they think if you don't eat it, it's probably awful for you.
Yeah. Actually, to your point, uh, we published a paper about 2 years ago in Nature Communications. It was the second most downloaded publications from that journal, and it's a very high tier journal. And it really was about using the fasting mimicking diet 3 to 4 times a year, 3 to 4 times a year, and it resulted in a 2.5 year reduction in biological age. When you think about it, like, what else can you do for 15 days or 20 days a year that will lower your biological age by 2.5 years?
Yeah.
Give me that. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say, like, right?
Yeah.
It's the investment and return on the investment. That ratio is just amazing.
Yeah.
And
And was it for 1 year only or for multiple years that they on average that they did it?
this is a great question, Aaron. So it was 1 year, right? So
Okay.
the estimation was 1 year. But if you continue on to do this for 20 years, and so now it's a computer modeling you're talking about. Right. So when you do from age 50, for example, to age 70, that's an example. You would reduce biological age by about 11 and a half years.
Okay. So you wouldn't keep
And
getting 2 years a year. You would
no, no, no. I
I would
mean,
think it would diminish that
yeah, I
follow.
mean, the tide is stronger, right? The aging
Mhm.
tide is stronger as you age. But just to think about, like, and it's not even that expensive to do, right?
Right.
To be able to lower the risk of all these age-related conditions, by activating what's already in your body. It's not
Mhm.
even a drug concept, right?
Mhm.
It's allowing your body to activate what's already inside,
Mhm.
a healing ability,
Mhm.
right? By exposing you to a periodic fasting, but still supporting with nutrition. I mean, this
Mhm.
is why it excites me, right? When I think about the potential to improve human health.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly, without pharmaceuticals, like you said, and with a more upstream holistic they're actually healthier, whereas I would argue that pharmaceutical isn't necessarily making you healthier on the same level. It may be blocking a pathway, and in some way you have improved health of just your blood sugar is not high, but it's not as upstream as healing your, cellular health or improving your cellular health maybe.
And just the burdens that multiple medications, time after time, you go into
Yeah,
the doctor's office and you just get more and more. So a
yeah,
non-pharmacological approach that helps you to be able to reduce that burden
yeah.
is a huge benefit of the fasting mimicking diet.
Okay, well, let me ask you this because I've done Prolon with hundreds of my patients. I've probably done it 10 times. I know my way a little bit around a Prolon kit. Let me ask you this. Um, my thinking, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think of it as with respect to your actual health benefit, equivalent to a 5-day fast. It's just the problem is that very few people will undergo a true 5-day only water situation like that fast. However, I find that a large number of people can achieve a 5-day fasting mimicking diet, like with a Prolon. So to me, there is a benefit. The benefit is that you can even do it. But is that something you agree with, or are you saying that there's some kind of benefit um, to a Prolon kit compared to like just a 5-day water fast? Aside from that,
I think just taking away the hunger for one is what sells me over a water fast to doing the 5-day
yeah,
fast, whether it's Prolon. Um, but the safety concerns. So when we're talking specifically about, our metabolic patients or people with diabetes that are on medications that could make that unsafe for them to do. We don't want them to have hypoglycemia. So
Yeah.
having, guidance there, having some structure with a program, having the nourishment throughout the 5 days allows that person that maybe wouldn't be able to fast with water alone
Yeah.
to be able to get that experience.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, that's how I think of it. It's like it just really lowers the bar and allows more people to achieve a 5-day fast, and which is a huge deal. I don't mean to diminish what Prolon is. It's just that
Hmm.
I'm curious. I was curious about that. And then
Yeah.
one other question I have is I've noticed that Prolon is very low in protein, which I think is probably because there's like the mTOR pathway that I know you can talk about much more intelligently than I can, but when you kind of use that analogy of, okay, your body, you start to fast, your body's going to go look for currency and it will go to the adipose tissue and pull out fat. I guess maybe you could talk to that a little bit about
Yeah.
actually not all currencies are equivalent when it comes
Yeah.
to fasting. Like the fat, your body needs these amino acids to run. So it's trying to find them. It finds them in these
Hmm.
of proteins, but not the adipose tissue. But if you're eating
Yeah.
amino acids, then you're kicking off this pathway. Like maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think some people may be hung up on the fact that, oh, it's low protein is don't we need less carb and more protein, and more protein is always better. I really want to speak to that a little bit. Um, I think the question you have to ask is, to what end? What are you trying to achieve with nutrition? And if you're saying, well, of course, it's vitality, it's performance, it's strength, it's endurance, it's right, then you're going to say, sure, let's have more protein. But that's a single view, because I think when you talk about health, you really need to talk about, yes, performance is one aspect, but also health span as well, longevity, right? And the time you spend staying healthy is critically important. It's not just all about performance. Now, when you use that as your double bottom line, then it's like this. When you think about on a car race, in a car race, obviously you want to get to the end quickest. But when you are flooring the pedal to the floor, what do you have to worry about? Well, your tire treads are being burned up, and you can last. Sure, you could have the fastest car, but what if you burn up your tires, and then you
Mhm,
cannot get to the end? What good is it when you have performance but you have no longevity?
mhm.
You see?
Yeah.
And so what do the racers do? Well, they stop at the pit stop. To do what? To change the tires.
Right.
Now
Yeah,
the
like
fasting
you
maybe
benefit from maybe another analogy, like you benefit from running or cardio, but you also benefit from sleeping.
that's
There's
exactly right.
there's maybe different phases
That's exactly right.
that
And
benefit
that's
in different
why
ways.
and that's why the fasting mimicking diet is that pit stop for you. It's that sleeping, it's that rest. You cannot run marathon all day long and think you're gonna live until 90, right?
Mhm,
And so during that, it's very important during the pit stop you don't rev up more tires, right? That's the time you're gonna say, I'm gonna actually downregulate. I'm actually gonna suppress the signals the cells are getting from all the
mhm,
nutrients. This is where you don't want that protein. 4 or 5 days. Now,
mhm.
rest of the time, right? You can do whatever you need to achieve performance. But for that 5 days, you don't want to have high protein. Because
Yeah.
when you have the high protein, the cells is thinking, oh, I need to grow. No, 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 no. This is the time to rejuvenate, to
Mhm.
recycle, to go into autophagy.
Yeah.
And that's why the fasting mimicking diet, for the time you're trying to mimic fast, you don't increase your protein intake during the 5 days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just a matter of calories. It's, are you triggering these pathways, these signaling
Yes.
pathways in your body that say, we're in a sprint, we're in a marathon, we're performing right now. If you eat, you could potentially eat low calorie, high protein. Like I just have only whey protein, 700 calories a day. That wouldn't probably achieve the same thing
Not
as
at all.
a prolong, because that heavily stimulates that performance pathway, and you're actually trying to get into more of the rest
That's right.
pathway. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
But do you think that, I mean, I think you've kind of said it, but I think this has just been a hang up I've had a little bit sometimes with, I get it. I have a small company. It's already difficult for me to control the messaging. I can't even imagine for you all, but I sometimes have struggled a little bit with, like, I'll send a patient to buy their kit and now they're on your list, and maybe I have them join your Facebook group. And I feel like sometimes they'll get some messaging that confuses them around this because they'll think that it's implied that they should eat low protein sort of like all the time.
No,
Yeah.
no. And this is where personalization comes in. Ashley, you want to speak to kind of how your team, right, adds to the
Mhm.
dimension of personalization?
Yes. I mean, as you know, Erin, when you assess somebody, you know kind of about what they need to meet their goals, whatever that might be. So during the 5 days of the fast, that protein is low, but it's exactly for that reason. I'm not triggering those nutrient sensing pathways. But in between, we want to support our protein needs and our carb needs and our fat needs, because all of those macronutrients are important in our body. And so it's, I would really focus, and you're probably in the same way too, on just good quality foods. Help people eat better, make better
Yeah.
choices, more, non-starchy vegetables, higher micronutrient content foods, plant-based fats, um, good quality proteins when they're having them, maybe less of those. Most Americans well overeat protein, whether it's from powders, whether it's from animal products, but just having a more balanced diet in between that is better, and better for health span too,
Yeah.
better for their longevity.
Yeah. I'm
What
glad you
type
touched
of
on that,
what do
because
you usually encourage?
what do I encourage?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're all a team with different, we practice separately, but I will say the one sort of thing that I hire for is dietitians that believe in omnivorous diets.
Hmm.
I might leave it at that for now. I think you know what I mean by that. And a whole foods
Yeah.
omnivorous diet is really what I try to hire for, and like as you said, the dietitian individualize from there. And what I
Mhm.
like that you kind of highlighted is that, yeah, it'd be whether you're using Prolon kits or other fasting modalities, your diet quality in between still is extremely important. It's not like this is some magic band-aid that's just gonna kind of get you off the hook and you can eat crazy the rest of the time. It certainly does something special that you're not going to achieve otherwise with a healthy diet. But your general dietary pattern, I would argue, is probably the most important thing when it comes to your long-term health.
Mhm. Yeah, so definitely the protein is still important. So it's adequate protein for your age and for your health goals.
Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Tell me about how you think that, because I kind of wing this with people, and I'm curious what you think on this. Is like, how do you feel like, let's just talk about a scenario. It's a fairly common scenario. Let's say somebody's overweight, they have pre-diabetes, they maybe get put on a blood pressure medication, they want to get healthier without medication, so they start the healthy whole foods diet that we just talked about.
Mhm.
Then they start doing the Prolon a few times a year. And a question that often comes up is, okay, well then when I'm not doing my Prolon kits, should I also do some time restricted feeding as well? So eating within a 12-hour window, or maybe even an 8-hour window? Or is it that because I'm otherwise eating a healthy quality diet, maybe exercising a fair amount and doing this Prolon 2 or 3 times a year, is it necessary to do any time restricted feeding?
I think the time restricted eating is still important, in between fasts. So the circadian fast that you're kind of referring to of the 12 hours would be what I would recommend as well. And maybe working on having your last meal a couple hours before you lay down at night, so that digestion process happens. And then when you lie down to rest, everything gets to rest together. So I think the
Mm,
daily fast is important to long-term health. Some people need or want to do some more elongated fasting, and that's okay too. I think, some research has come out in the last 2 years too, saying that too much fasting is a stress on the body. So I think it's important to work with a professional to give you some guidance there. But I think if it's done on an occasional basis, that's fine. A couple times a week, if you want to do, um, even more fasting that day. But generally, a 12-hour fast, I think, is a good way to go, so that you're not triggering stress in your body
Okay.
chronically.
To me, that's just a general healthy, like everyone, not that everyone does, but I think just
Mhm.
I would almost not even, in some of the research, they call that time restricted feeding, but I think of that as just the basic human health thing of if you start eating at 7 a.m., you should be done by 7 p.m. or etc. But it sounds like, Ashley, you don't think they should get necessarily more aggressive with that and start skipping breakfast or dinner.
Not every single day.
Yeah.
If you want to do it, occasionally, a couple times a week, I think that's fine. But every day, that can be hard on the body.
Yeah. Yeah. What about the research that you're talking about that suggested that too much fasting is problematic? Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, it was a study last spring. Dr. Shu, can you remember who?
Yeah, so there was an abstract submitted to the American Heart Association meeting, and it's actually more cardiovascular events happening to those. But you also think about, I mean, it's not difficult to imagine that fasting is a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's a catabolic process.
Mhm.
Too much of it in the wrong health conditions may not be good. It's almost also like it's, when we say, oh, it's exercise good. Well, it depends.
Mhm.
If somebody already have triple vessel blockage in their heart, and you ask them to run a marathon, my goodness, you're going to kill this guy,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important, and that's why I think personalization is so important. You
Yeah.
know, everybody comes with a different, especially if you have health conditions.
Yeah.
And this is why I think always, work with a dietitian, work with a healthcare provider, especially if you have health conditions, to see how
Mhm.
this may fit into your profile. Now, if
Mhm.
you're generally healthy, a little bit younger, and have no other comorbidities, doing fasting mimicking diet on your own, for health and wellness, for longevity, I certainly support that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you point out that's catabolic, meaning breaking things down. And when we kind of think about, tell me if you disagree, but I feel like there's pretty strong research showing that lean mass is really critical for protecting you against risk of morbidity and mortality with age.
Hmm.
And if you spend too much time, it's hard enough for people to maintain their lean mass with aging as it is. And then if you're spending a lot of time in this catabolic state, you're going to have an even harder time of it. So that's a big part of why I like to think about what you said
Yeah.
about the cycles of, you have your catabolic stages and then you have your anabolic stages, and there's kind of a yin and the yang between those two things.
And I love your expression. That's exactly right, Erin. You don't talk about exercise without talking about rest.
Yeah.
If you run 20 miles every single day, 365 days of the year, I don't think
Yeah.
that's a recipe for health, right?
Yeah.
So same thing. I mean, if you say, well, why don't we just fast like a month every month? That's
Yeah. A
going to
month every
death. I
month.
mean,
Never eat again.
yeah, that means death, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, last question, and then I want to hear more about how people can reach out to you guys. But I feel like it's not it's a new era of the fasting movement. I think the initial era, I think it was totally new. Nobody even had it on their radar. Then I feel like a lot of people just kind of like took it as their excuse to just skip breakfast. And we see a lot of people where they've been just for a long time, saying like, okay, I'm frustrated because I listened to all the YouTube videos. I'm eating within an 8-hour window. I skip breakfast faithfully every day, and I still have all these health problems. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit in terms of like, okay, that we know there's research on time restricted feeding and fasting of benefiting people, but I feel like there's quite a lot of people that seem to not be having
yeah,
success with their like sort of efforts with it.
yeah.
What do you say to that?
I would say, there's nuances to this
Mm,
whole discussions around fasting. If you have to fast with time restricted eating, I would say you should probably fast towards later parts of the day rather
yeah.
than skipping breakfast, right? Just think about physiology. I mean, you're sleeping, you're resting. I mean, when you wake up, you want fuel in the body.
Hmm.
But before you go to bed, that's when everything should shut down. You should, if you want to fast, you should have more hours between your last meal and your bedtime,
Yeah.
rather than when you wake up in the morning,
Yeah.
right?
And there's
And so,
research comparing this early
absolutely,
window and showing it's
absolutely,
better. Yeah.
absolutely. There's a lot of breakfast skippers who
Mhm.
actually have worse outcomes, health outcomes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there is a wisdom in breaking the fast. We call it breakfast. Why? Why? Because fasting, just like resting or exercise, you got to do it right,
Yeah.
right? So then number one. Number two is, this is also why we advocated nourish to fast,
Mhm.
right? From what as at L-Nutra, we make products and services available to mimic the fast, rather than for you to just like to do this cold turkey, water only fast for days. We believe in nourishment.
Mhm.
So now, because we're in the 21st century, we already understand the molecular pathways. So we're really hacking the systems to give you the benefits of fast without the hardcore kind of like bearing it through, right?
Yeah.
Like in the ancient times. And that's why, I mean, we're in the 21st century. There is a better way to really get the benefits of fasting.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it's
Thank
good
you.
quality nutrition too. And, in our fast bars or fast shakes, it's good quality nutrition. Over and over again, I talk to people that they do daily fasting, as you're talking about, Erin, but they don't make changes with what they're eating in between. They're not eating healthier foods. They're just doing that
Yeah.
smaller window and expecting results. But they're a lot
Yeah.
of times depleted of good nutrition. They don't get enough good vitamins and minerals and good quality foods that support your health. So yes, maybe it's less time, but if it's not with good quality foods, then it doesn't serve you well in the long run.
Absolutely. We actually kind of have a protocol in our practice where it's like there's an order to this. The first phase is that you start eating a nutrient dense whole foods diet. And then we will then be willing to support you with implementing a fasting modality. And then if you further aren't achieving your goals, we'll consider a ketogenic diet. But it's that order, like you said, of it's I think when people aren't supported, they'll often continue with their like poor quality Western diet and just try to eat that in a smaller window. And that's not really usually going to get them very far.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, you guys are amazing. I mean, I feel like I could ask you questions all day, but I know have an hour with you. So I appreciate it so much. And I'm sure people will be really fascinated by this topic and wanting to learn more about fasting mimicking diets, about Prolon, and about L-Nutra. So can you share a little bit about where people can go to learn more?
Yes, you can go to lnutrahealth.com.
Okay,
So L-Nutra, Nutra.com.
great. Okay. And I think that is it. I mean, people can purchase the kits there, right?
Mhm.
And then I think once you get a kit, you get information about there's a Facebook group, unless it recently has stopped happening. As far as I know, there's a Facebook group. Is that right?
Yes, there's still the fascination. Is that
Fascination. That's right.
yeah.
Yeah. Fascination. And then, of course, you have a wonderful newsletter that you send out. The kit comes with instructions. And then there's even programs that people can enroll in if they need support.
Absolutely. Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. And I appreciate you being on the Empowered Nutrition podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you,
Take care.
Erin.
Take care.
Nice to meet you.